Unaware of his $50 fortune, Natalie Ward forced her husband Alexander to sleep in the maid's quarters that night, while her lover Damien Cross slid beneath the Egyptian sheets of the same marital bed Alex had built with his bare hands. The scent of betrayal wasn't poetic. It was painfully human. Her perfume on Damien's shirt, the faint laughter echoing through the corridor of their Dallas mansion, and the creak of the floorboards when Alex quietly closed the servant's door behind him. It wasn't supposed to end like this. Alex had once carried Natalie through rain-soaked streets in Houston after her car broke down, long before the mansion, before Damien, before the cruel tone that now curled around her every word. Back then, she'd said he was her safe place. My kind, patient Alexander, who'd rather fix a broken door than brag about a broken world. But kindness, in her new world, had become synonymous with weakness. That night, she had sneered at him in front of her friends. "You want to act like a man, Alex? Then stop pretending this is your house. Damien's company actually owns it now. Go sleep where you belong, with the staff." "Get out of my sight, Alex. Go sleep where you belong, with the staff." Those were the words Natalie Ward hurled at her husband before locking their bedroom door and letting her lover climb into their bed, believing she'd finally broken the man she called a failure. Under the chandelier's glow, she raised a glass of champagne beside her lover and sneered, "Maybe humility will finally teach you your place, Alex." She had no idea the man standing in silence across the room owned the chandelier above her head, the mansion beneath her feet, and a 50 BOI empire built quietly in his name. The world saw a humiliated husband sleeping in the maid's quarters, but what they didn't see was the billionaire strategist who'd built empires under an alias, watching in silence as betrayal turned into his greatest weapon. When she filed for divorce, Natalie laughed through her tears. "I deserve half, Alex. You're lucky I stayed married to you this long." But the courtroom that day didn't hold a broken man. It held a patient one, a man whose silence had sharpened into precision. She never knew that behind his stillness were 7 layers of revenge, each one written in law, business, and power. The moment Alex revealed the truth, that the poor husband she mocked was the heir to Ward Global Holdings, her empire of pride crumbled in front of the world. What he did next didn't just destroy their illusion of wealth and love. It redefined what strength, mercy, and justice really mean. Viewers, imagine the person who betrayed you discovering too late that you were never powerless. Would you forgive them or finish what betrayal began? Her words hit harder than any physical blow. The laughter from her social circle, people who once toasted to Alex's humility, now filled the marble living room like static. He didn't fight back. He didn't even blink. He just looked at her once quietly, like a man measuring the final distance between love and decay. Then he carried his pillow and a folded blanket toward the servant's wing as the group watched, whispering. In the small, dim maid's quarters, Alex sat on the iron bed and stared at the moonlight slicing through the blinds. The silence was heavy, filled with unanswered questions. How the woman he had given everything to could weaponize his humility. How her laughter could echo over the very foundation his family's name had quietly financed decades ago. No one, not Natalie, not Damien, not even the house they stood in, knew that the man humiliated in the servant's room was the true heir to Ward Global Holdings, a multinational empire controlling defense contracts, aerospace logistics, and energy pipelines. For 15 years, he'd hidden that truth behind a quiet alias, Alex Reed, to live a life detached from the world of sycophants and social climbers. He wanted to marry for love, not legacy, but love had betrayed him in the cruelest way possible. From the distance, he heard Natalie's laughter again, softer now, layered with Damien's voice. Every syllable twisted inside him, a coil of pain and revelation. He pulled out his phone, opened a hidden message thread labeled Dr. L. Hayes. A single unread text blinked. Alex, the trust conditions have matured. You're free to reveal your identity anytime now. He stared at it for a long time, unmoving. Outside, thunder rolled across the Dallas sky. Inside, Alex whispered to himself, she has no idea who she's thrown into the dirt. But what would he do now that he finally did? Years before the humiliation of the maid's quarters, Alexander Ward had met Natalie Spencer in a cramped university cafe off Westheimer Road in Houston. She was 21 then, studying marketing, full of restless ambition, and talking too loudly about how she'd never live paycheck to paycheck like her parents. Alex was a graduate assistant in mechanical engineering, quiet, meticulous, sipping coffee from a chipped mug and sketching blueprints for his research project. Their first interaction wasn't cinematic, it was human. She spilled her latte on his notes, panicked, apologized, and offered to rewrite them. He smiled and said, "It's fine. Accidents build stories." She laughed and said, "Then maybe we'll have one worth telling someday." And they did, at least for a while. Back then, Alex was already living under an alias, Alex Reed. His grandfather's will had stipulated that he must spend 10 years outside the Ward estate without disclosing his lineage to anyone, to understand people, not power. He lived simply, quietly building a small logistics startup that no one knew was bankrolled through a blind family trust. Natalie loved him when he was poor, or what she thought was poor. She said she admired his simplicity, his old soul, the way he fixed broken furniture instead of buying new. But after their wedding, the cracks began to show. It started subtly. Natalie's envy of other couples' vacations, her fixation on luxury, her discomfort when Alex showed generosity to strangers instead of ambition for himself. She'd scroll through social media, comparing their life to others. "Why can't you just be more like Damian Cross?" she asked once, eyes glued to her phone. "He's my friend's husband, built a tech company from nothing. They travel, they live, they enjoy. We just survive." Alex had smiled then, patient as always. "We're building our foundation, Nat. I'd rather be steady than flashy." But patience to her wasn't security, it was stagnation. By the 5th year of marriage, Natalie stopped attending Alex's small family gatherings and began hosting lavish parties for people she barely knew. She said it was networking, but it was really about validation. Damian appeared at one of those parties, a tall, smooth-talking man with a tailored suit and an easy smirk. He praised her wine choice, complimented her ambition, and looked at her the way Alex hadn't lately, like a challenge, not a commitment. That was the night Alex first noticed the change. Natalie's laughter was different around Damian, sharper, livelier. When Damian left, she talked about him for hours, not realizing how her tone stung. Alex didn't confront her. He believed love was patience, not suspicion. But when he tucked her into bed that night, she whispered sleepily, "You'll be something someday, Alex. Maybe then I'll finally feel enough." He kissed her forehead and smiled in the dark, not realizing he was already losing her. Years later, when he stood in that maid's quarters staring at the ceiling, those words returned to him like prophecy. She had wanted more. Now she would get everything, but not the way she imagined. The night Alex discovered Natalie's affair didn't come with a dramatic confession. It came with silence, an unfamiliar kind of silence that filled their Dallas home like fog. Natalie had been distant for weeks, glued to her phone, spending long hours helping Damian with his charity projects. She had changed her wardrobe, her perfume, even her laughter. The house smelled different now, an expensive cologne that wasn't his, lingering faintly in the hallway outside their bedroom. One evening, while preparing a client presentation on his laptop in the living room, Alex's phone buzzed. A text from their mutual friend, Lydia, flashed across the screen. "I don't know how to tell you this, but I just saw Natalie and Damian at the Four Seasons. They weren't exactly having a business dinner." Alex didn't reply. He just stared at the message until the words blurred. His chest tightened, but his expression didn't change. He closed his laptop, stood, and walked upstairs to find Natalie laughing on a video call, her voice lower, softer, the way she used to sound with him. He lingered by the half-closed door, hearing fragments. "He's sweet, but he'll never understand what we have. He's just too simple, Damian. I feel alive around you." "He doesn't suspect a thing," Damian replied, his tone smooth, predatory. "Let him play house. You and I belong where the real money moves." Her giggle sliced through Alex like glass. He didn't confront her that night. Instead, he walked out to the patio, sat on the stone steps, and stared at the city skyline. He had built this home from his own architectural sketches. Every column, every tile had passed through his hands, but suddenly it felt alien, owned by strangers. At midnight, he walked back inside. Natalie was asleep, her phone glowing faintly on the nightstand. He hesitated, then picked it up. The messages were explicit, intimate, careless. Photos, hotel bookings. A flight to Miami, she told him, was a business summit, but one message stopped him cold. "He's pathetic, Nat. Let him sleep in the maid's quarters next time I visit. That'll teach him humility." And she had done it. Alex placed the phone back where it was, quietly. No rage, no shouting, just a stillness that felt dangerous. His kindness, once his strength, began to calcify into something else. Precision. When Natalie stirred in her sleep, murmuring Damien's name, Alex turned and walked to his study. He opened the drawer, retrieved an old envelope sealed with his father's initials, one he hadn't touched in years. Inside lay the contact card of Dr. Laura Hayes, his family's corporate attorney. He stared at the card under the lamplight. The name looked different now, sharper. That night, Alex didn't sleep. He drafted an email, brief, factual. "Laura, it's time. I need to discuss the Ward estate. Confidentially." He hit send. Outside, the wind carried the faint laughter from upstairs, a sound that no longer broke him. It built him. By dawn, he wasn't the same man anymore. By the time Dr. Laura Hayes arrived at the secluded law office overlooking downtown Dallas, Alex had already been sitting there for an hour, sleepless, calm, and strangely focused. The early sunlight cut through the blinds, washing his face in cold gold. Laura walked in, silver-haired, dignified, her eyes studying him with quiet respect. "You look like your father did the day he signed the merger deal," she said gently, "but something tells me this isn't business as usual." Alex smiled faintly. "It's not. It's personal." He handed her a folder, photos, screenshots, timestamps, bank transfers linking Natalie and Damien's secret accounts. "I thought love would make her happy. Turns out she only wanted leverage." Laura flipped through the documents, her expression unreadable. "I assume you've confirmed the affair?" He nodded once. "And the humiliation. She made me sleep in the maid's quarters last night." For the first time in years, Laura's composure cracked. "She did what?" He leaned back, his tone almost gentle. "Apparently, that's what humility looks like when your wife thinks you're broke." Laura set the folder down, sighed, and unlocked her briefcase. "Then it's time you remember who you are, Alex. I wasn't allowed to tell you until the trust matured. But as of last quarter, the full inheritance is legally yours. Ward Global Holdings, all $50 billion of it." The words landed like a quiet explosion. He didn't speak for several seconds. The air seemed heavier. $50 billion, he repeated softly as though tasting the weight of it. Laura nodded. "Your grandfather built an empire in shipping, aerospace, and energy. Your father expanded it. You've lived under an alias for 12 years to prove you weren't corrupted by it. And you weren't. But now," she met his eyes, "now you decide what to do with the power that was always yours." Alex's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the desk. "She thinks I'm nothing. Damien thinks I'm weak. But they both built their pride on a lie. Mine." He opened his phone and scrolled through Natalie's photos, her laughing with Damien, wearing diamonds he'd unknowingly bought her through the shared account. He didn't feel anger anymore, only clarity. "What would you do," he asked quietly, "if someone used your kindness as a weapon?" Laura's response was steady. "I'd make sure that weapon cuts only once, and never again." That afternoon, they spent 6 hours behind closed doors, drafting the legal architecture of a plan that would unravel everything Natalie and Damien stood on. Quietly, surgically. Corporate ownership documents shifted. Trust sub-companies were repositioned. A dormant holding entity in Delaware came alive again. By evening, Alex stood at the window, watching the Dallas skyline burn orange in the sunset. "She threw me into the dirt," he murmured, "but I was born from deeper soil than she'll ever understand." Laura closed her briefcase and said, "Then let's start planting the seeds." He turned to her, eyes calm, voice absolute. "Not seeds, Laura. Traps." Alex moved like a man who had finally accepted that silence, and timing would be his deadliest tools. He didn't shout. He didn't storm into parties with threats. He drafted quiet motions, signed back-channel transfer orders, and opened three-sealed corporate envelopes that had sat dormant in Ward Global's legal vault for years. Each one contained instruments most social climbers never learned about: special-purpose vehicles, vote proxies, retention clauses, and a tiny army of contingency trusts. Laura's hand was steady. Marcus Trent's was reliable. He'd traded investigative journalism for loyalty long ago and now ran a small forensic accounting team that owed Alex more than friendship. Their first move was surgical: freeze the joint credit lines and trace the payments. Laura executed subpoenas through a magistrate's clerk under pretextual civil discovery, strictly legal, all by the book. Marcus and his team followed the money like bloodhounds, turning up wire transfers to shell entities registered in Panama and the Cayman Islands, invoices with identical signatures routed through Damien's consultancy, and art purchases funneled through Natalie's philanthropic foundation. Each transaction was a thread. Together they showed a pattern of collusion, falsified invoices, and deliberate misrepresentation of corporate funds. Parallel to that, Alex activated a dormant Ward subsidiary in Delaware, an entity with the right to call in certain debts within Damien's portfolio. Damien had borrowed to expand. He'd assumed those loans were too small to trigger Ward Global's attention. Alex quietly bought the loan notes through intermediary funds Laura mobilized, nothing traceable back to his name. Overnight, he became the creditor with authority to demand repayment. When Damien's cash flow projections failed to materialize, Alex's proxy called the loans due. At the same time, Marcus fed carefully curated leaks to a national paper, precise, damning, and legally defensible. Damien's consultancy billed $2.8 million for a research retreat that never happened. Natalie's foundation declared charitable gifts to shell organizations that transferred money back as consulting fees. Public scrutiny didn't explode immediately, but the right investors and board members began asking quiet questions. Damien's investors scheduled emergency calls. Alex didn't forget the personal. He instructed a trusted PI to document Damien and Natalie's meetings, hotel check-ins, private flights, a sequence of late-night dinners at boutique hotels. The PI's dossier, compiled with timestamps and receipts, would later serve in court as corroboration for the financial evidence. Alex took no pleasure in the dossier. He took clarity. He wanted facts, not fantasies. He also engineered an internal audit at Ward Global that revealed a series of contracts championed by Damien's firm. Contracts that, on paper, enriched certain Ward-adjacent vendors. He prepared board resolutions that would reassign investigative authority to a compliance committee chaired by a Ward-appointed director. The paperwork made everything look like corporate housekeeping. To the outside world, it was routine. To Damien, it was the first hint of a tightening noose. At night, Alex would stand in the study and rehearse the courtroom rhythm, how Laura would cross-examine, how Marcus would present ledgers, how Judge Raymond Cole would receive the DNA petition they had not yet filed. Each move was a cold, patient chess play, not a dramatic blaze. When he finally locked the last file and sent an encrypted copy to Laura and Marcus, Alex felt neither triumph nor hate. He felt an almost surgical calm. He had begun the dismantling. The first tremor hit Damien Cross on a Thursday morning. He was halfway through a breakfast meeting at the Crescent Hotel, bragging to potential investors about his record-breaking quarter, when his assistant's phone started buzzing nonstop. Her face drained of color as she whispered something and slid a tablet across the table. "Sir, the bank just called. All 3 credit lines are frozen." Damien's smile didn't falter, but his fork paused midair. "Run it through our secondary." "They're frozen too." Within minutes, his finance director called. A Ward-affiliated holding company had invoked a seldom-used clause demanding repayment on outstanding loans. $42 million, due immediately. Damien laughed it off at first, the way arrogant men laugh when they sense danger but refuse to believe it. "Some clerk's mistake," he muttered. But as he scrolled through the emails, the signatures were authentic, the legal trail airtight. By noon, news of Cross Capital's liquidity concerns reached the Dallas Financial Review. The article was brief but devastating. Anonymous sources, internal inconsistencies, possible misuse of charitable funds. Investors pulled back. Partners stopped returning calls. And in Natalie's mansion that same day, the panic began to ripple. She found Damien pacing in her living room, sleeves rolled up, voice sharp. "Who the hell is behind this?" he snapped. "Someone's buying my debt from the inside." Natalie frowned, clutching her coffee cup. "You mean Ward Global?" He looked up, startled. "Why would you?" "They're the only company with that kind of leverage here," she said quickly. "But Alex? He's nothing. He can't even afford rent without me." Damien barked a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Then maybe your nobody husband just sold me to them." Natalie's stomach twisted. The words sounded absurd, but a fragment of memory surfaced. Alex's quiet phone calls at night, his strange composure after she humiliated him, the way he'd stopped arguing altogether. She shook her head. "No, he's too weak." Damien didn't respond. He was staring at his phone. Maybe weakness was just his costume. Across town in the penthouse office of Ward Global Holdings, Alex watched the markets in silence. On his monitor, Cross Capital's shares dipped again, another 5%. Marcus's report flashed across the screen. Investor withdrawals now total $180 million. Laura stood behind him. "That's 3 of 7, she said softly. Alex nodded. "The financial exposure stage is complete. He'll look for Natalie now." "And when he does?" Alex's tone didn't waver. "Let them implode together." By evening, Damien's world was burning. Accountants resigned, PR firms distanced themselves, and an SEC inquiry appeared in his inbox. At home, Natalie tried calling him repeatedly, but each time, the line dropped. Finally, at 11:47 p.m., she received a single text. "Don't contact me. We're both targets. Whoever's doing this knows everything." She stared at the message, fear crawling under her skin. The woman who once mocked her husband for sleeping in the maid's quarters now felt the same claustrophobic chill closing in on her. Miles away, Alex stepped onto his balcony, the Dallas skyline glittering below. He breathed in the cold night air, the hum of the city vibrating through glass and steel. For the first time in years, he didn't feel small. He felt precise, and the silence that followed was not peace. It was the sound of something vast shifting beneath their world. When Natalie filed for divorce, she thought she was making the first move. She didn't know Alex had already written the final chapter. Her lawyer, a young, overconfident attorney named Brooke Klein, assured her that Texas's community property laws would secure her half of everything. "Even if he hides assets, we'll find them," Brooke said confidently. "He'll crawl out of this with nothing but his toothbrush." Natalie smiled, the same smile she'd worn at every social function while pretending her marriage was intact. She imagined Damien and herself rebuilding their empire, free from the dead weight of her simple husband. But Damien was unreachable, his phone disconnected, his company drowning in lawsuits. Still, she convinced herself that once she took Alex's meager savings, she could start over. On the morning of the first hearing, she wore white, an attempt to look pure, victimized. Cameras flashed as she stepped out of her car. To her, this was a performance. To Alex, it was the battlefield. Inside the courtroom, Judge Raymond Cole presided, a man known for precision and intolerance for theatrics. Natalie's attorney began with carefully rehearsed sympathy. "Your Honor, my client has endured emotional neglect and financial abandonment. Mr. Ward, under the alias Alex Reed, has concealed income and forced Mrs. Ward to live in conditions unworthy of a husband's care." The courtroom murmured. Alex, in a charcoal suit, sat beside Dr. Laura Hayes, silent, composed. He didn't flinch as Natalie avoided his gaze. Laura rose. "Your Honor, the defense will prove not only that Mr. Ward has provided more than adequate support, but that Mrs. Ward has engaged in marital infidelity, financial deception, and slander. We also have compelling evidence of paternity fraud involving their daughter, Emma." The room froze. Natalie's head snapped toward her lawyer. "What is she talking about?" she whispered. Laura continued evenly. "A court-authorized DNA test confirms Mr. Ward is not the biological father. Mrs. Ward concealed this fact while misusing joint funds to support her lover, Mr. Damian Cross, whose company, incidentally, is now under federal investigation. Natalie's lawyer stammered. "Objection. Overruled," said Judge Cole. Laura placed documents on the evidence table. Transaction records, photographs, bank statements. Each paper landed like a blow. Then came Marcus Trent, stepping forward as a witness, projecting financial charts onto a courtroom screen. Cross Capital transferred funds from Ward subsidiaries through Natalie Ward's personal foundation. "We've traced every dollar," he said. She was aware. The courtroom's air thickened with whispers. Natalie's face drained of color. Brooke Klein's confidence evaporated as Judge Cole turned to her client. "Mrs. Ward, did you knowingly divert these funds?" Her voice cracked. I didn't know they were his," Laura interjected, calm but lethal. "Correction, Your Honor. She didn't know they were her husband's. Mr. Ward is the sole heir to Ward Global Holdings, valued at approximately $50 billion. The revelation detonated like thunder. Gasps filled the courtroom. Cameras clicked outside the hall as the word spread. Natalie's knees buckled. $50 billion? She whispered. Alex finally met her eyes. His voice was quiet, almost kind. "You forced me to sleep in the maid's quarters, Natalie. But that room taught me something valuable. How to live without you." Judge Cole's gavel struck once. Custody denied. Assets frozen. Divorce granted. Case adjourned. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Journalists shouting, Natalie sobbing, lawyers arguing. But Alex just stood, motionless, calm amid the storm. As he walked out, Laura whispered, "That's 6 of 7. He nodded, eyes steady. "One more." The last stage wouldn't happen in court. It would happen in public, under the same spotlight where she'd once humiliated him. The verdict spread faster than wildfire. Within 24 hours, every major business outlet carried the headline, "Billionaire heir Alexander Ward wins explosive divorce and corporate fraud case. Wife and her lover under investigation." Stock tickers scrolled his name. Talk shows debated the humble billionaire, and finance podcasts dissected his patience and strategy. Overnight, the man the world thought was a struggling analyst became a living myth, a lesson in quiet power. For Natalie, it was a nightmare broadcast on every screen. Reporters camped outside her gated mansion, cameras waiting for a glimpse of the woman who had mocked her husband into legend. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing, brands cutting ties, charities withdrawing her memberships, her friends vanishing from group chats. Even her mother Helen called once, voice trembling. "Natalie, what have you done?" She couldn't answer. The mansion that once felt like triumph now looked like a mausoleum, silent, echoing, cold. The marble floors still gleamed, but everything inside was leased with funds now under court freeze. The house technically belonged to Ward Holdings, and repossession was already underway. Damian was worse off. His companies collapsed under forensic audits. Every investor fled, lawsuits piled, and by the time federal agents arrived at his Dallas condo, he was already trying to liquidate art pieces for cash. Marcus's article hit the internet the same hour. Cross Capital's rise and fall, how greed, lies, and infidelity triggered the collapse of a tech empire. The accompanying photos, Damian and Natalie leaving hotels together, did the rest. On social media, sympathy turned into spectacle. Memes, hashtags, podcasts, everyone had an opinion. She traded kindness for cash and lost both. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Natalie stopped reading after the first 100 comments. 3 days later, the sheriff's car arrived. The warrant was precise, repossession of property held under Ward's subsidiary assets. She watched uniformed officers remove the luxury furniture she'd once boasted about. Her signature style, she'd called it. When they reached the master bedroom, she froze. The same bed where Damian had slept now looked obscene in daylight, a monument to her downfall. Outside, a black Rolls-Royce Phantom 8 waited at the curb. Alex stepped out, immaculate in a tailored navy suit. Reporters swarmed, microphones flashing. He didn't say a word until he reached the gate. Then in a voice calm enough to carry, he said, "Kindness is not weakness, but betrayal demands consequence." The cameras caught every syllable. Natalie came to the doorway, trembling. "Alex, please." I made a mistake. We can fix this. He looked at her, eyes steady, voice quiet. I already fixed it. He turned, got into the rolls, and the door closed with the soft precision of finality. As the car pulled away, the reporters pivoted toward her, flashes bursting, voices shouting questions she couldn't answer. Her mascara streaked under the Texas sun. For the first time, the world saw the woman who once laughed at humility, standing amid everything she'd lost. Miles away in Ward Tower's top floor, Laura Hayes watched the footage beside Alex. That's the 7th, she said softly. He nodded, expression unreadable. No, he murmured. The 7th is mercy, and I'm deciding if they deserve any. He turned back to the window, the skyline gleaming below, the noise of cameras fading into memory. The empire was whole again. The past was finished. A month after the verdict, Natalie Ward's name had become a cautionary tale whispered in expensive restaurants and corporate lounges. The woman who once curated her image with designer heels and dinner galas now wore discount sunglasses to hide from cameras. The mansion was gone, sold at auction to cover legal debts. She rented a small apartment near Arlington, far from the glittering Dallas skyline she once boasted about conquering. Her mother rarely called anymore. Damien didn't call at all. He was too busy fighting off federal charges for wire fraud and falsified securities reports. When the FBI raided his offices, he blamed everything on Natalie, claimed she had masterminded the shell transfers. She'd learned about his betrayal from a headline. Damien Cross pleads innocent, shifts blame to ex-lover. Karma, she thought, had a cruel sense of irony. She tried reaching Alex once more. The number he used during their marriage no longer existed. His new assistant at Ward Global refused to forward her emails. She sent a handwritten letter instead, apologizing, pleading, explaining that she had loved him once but lost herself in pressure and ambition. The letter came back unopened, stamped return to sender. Meanwhile, Alex Ward had become a symbol of composure in the business world, a billionaire who'd handled personal betrayal with surgical precision instead of scandal. Financial channels analyzed his strategies as case studies in emotional discipline. But behind his measured demeanor, he was still a man processing the collapse of everything he once believed about love. He spent long hours in his penthouse, overlooking the same city that had witnessed his humiliation and redemption. He still carried the memory of her laughter, how it used to sound before ambition hollowed it out. He wondered sometimes whether kindness was still possible after surviving betrayal. Marcus dropped by often, bringing updates on Damien's criminal case. They're projecting a 20-year sentence if the fraud charges hold, he said one evening, setting down a folder. His legal fees alone are eating what's left of his empire. Alex nodded but said nothing. Laura joined them briefly, reporting the final details. The divorce settlement finalized, all property recovered, charitable trusts reinstated under Ward Global. Justice, Alex, she said simply. He looked at her, half smiling. Justice, yes, but peace, that's harder. Late that night, he drove to the outskirts of town, parking by a quiet field near where he and Natalie had once picnicked during their early years together. The grass rustled under the breeze, the same Texas stars burned above, indifferent to human drama. He took a deep breath, letting the silence fill him. He remembered her younger self, the one who spilled coffee on his notes, laughed without calculation, dreamed without envy. That version of her was gone, replaced by a ghost built from greed. Still, he whispered to the night, I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I do. As he turned back toward the car, the faint glow of dawn appeared over Dallas. The revenge was complete, the empire secure, but the lesson was eternal. Never mistake gentleness for weakness. In the distance, a reporter's voice on a car radio replayed the closing line of his latest interview. Sometimes losing love teaches you more about value than gaining fortune ever could. He smiled, not bitterly, but like a man who had finally understood. Spring came quietly to Dallas. The city that once watched Alexander Ward rise from humiliation now whispered his name with respect. News outlets called him the man who built grace from betrayal, though he never gave interviews about Natalie, or the scandal or the trial that changed everything. He had moved back into the heart of the city, not to flaunt wealth, but to work. The top floor of Ward Tower now held the headquarters for a new foundation he'd launched, the Emma Hope Trust, named not for blood, but for forgiveness. Its mission was simple: provide education grants for children affected by broken homes and single-parent struggles. Every dollar came directly from his personal fortune. Every policy bore his quiet fingerprints. Reporters tried to connect this sudden philanthropy to guilt, or perhaps regret, but those closest to Alex knew it was something else entirely: closure. He no longer lived to avenge, he lived to restore balance. Laura Hayes still served as his legal counsel, but now she called herself his friend. She visited his office one morning, setting a thin envelope on his desk. "Final papers," she said. "Damien took a plea deal, 12 years minimum. Natalie declared bankruptcy last week. Everything's over, Alex." He nodded slowly, signing the documents. It was over the night she chose pride over peace. Laura studied him for a moment. Most men would have used that kind of power to destroy. He smiled faintly. Destruction was easy. Mercy took work. Outside, the skyline shimmered in early light. Dallas looked different to him now, not as a battlefield, but as proof of survival. He spent his afternoons walking through Ward Industrial Park, greeting engineers and interns. Many didn't even recognize him as the owner. He liked it that way. When one young man asked how he managed to rebuild after everything, Alex said quietly, "You don't rebuild, you evolve." That evening, as sunset washed the city in gold, he stopped by a small neighborhood cafe, the same one where he'd first met Natalie years ago. The place had changed ownership, but the aroma of roasted coffee was the same. He sat by the window, ordered black coffee, and watched people laugh, argue, fall in love, life moving on as it always did. He wasn't bitter anymore. The anger had burned itself out, leaving something cleaner behind. Wisdom, perhaps, or acceptance. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "You did it. Full circle." Alex typed back, "No circles, Marcus, just lessons." As he stepped outside, a breeze lifted his collar. A young couple walked past, arguing playfully, the girl scolding the boy for forgetting her birthday. Alex smiled because love, even imperfect, still mattered. He looked up at the twilight sky, the glass towers glowing like embers. "Grandfather," he whispered, "you were right. Power means nothing without restraint." Then he turned, slipping his hands into his pockets, and walked toward the parking lot where his rolls waited under the streetlights. The door closed softly. The engine hummed. Dallas receded in the rear-view mirror as he drove, not away from his past, but towards something gentler, quieter, and infinitely stronger than revenge: peace.